Holy shit, guys, they actually did it! Hey guys, camera for Bates Motel Season 4, Episode 9, Forever, and oh my god, this episode. I mean, there is so much to get into with this episode. Look, I knew this was coming. I really did. What happened this episode, I knew was eventually going to come up. I mean, we knew that from the second we started Bates Motel. I did not think what was going to happen this episode would happen, but it did happen, and honestly, I don't think they could have handled it better. I think they handled it perfectly in this episode. Without a doubt, the best episode of the season. And at first, I will say there were some things in this episode that annoyed me, but as I really thought about it, I thought, you know what, this really was a fantastic episode. I think it made sense as to why certain things turned out the way they did. But let's just get into this episode because I absolutely loved everything about this episode. A really crazy one to watch and a really hard one as well, especially the ending. Oh my god. But let's just get into it. There's a lot to talk about, and god damn it, the ending. So we start with Norma. She's asleep, and she wakes to find Romero in the living room where he slept with a gun on the coffee table, obviously because he's terrified of Norman. I mean, we know what happened from the night before. Norman tried to kill him, and I was thinking that that's what was going to happen here, is that Norman was going to kill Romero. I was like, all right, this is Romero's doomed. He's going to die in this episode. That's what I was thinking they were going to do. And she's far too ready to put the drama of last night behind her, reminding us how often she's seen similar behavior. You know, she already knows how erratic Norman is. She already knows what he tried to do. I mean, hell, he tried to kill the both of them, if you remember. And Romero, though, never has, obviously. Romero's never seen this behavior out of Norman, so he's freaking out. You know, he's saying that he doesn't want to leave her alone with him, but she already knows how to deal with it. I think Norma at this point, she knows what she has to deal with. She knows how erratic Norman is. She has to treat him like he's normal when she knows straight out that he's not. And he says, clearly rattled, basically, you know, if only he had never left, and you can tell that Romero really does want to help Norman, even though he doesn't know how he wants to, and Norma can be convincing, though. She says there's no way that Norman would hurt her. Of course, we all know that she's wrong. Norma sees them hug and kiss as Romero leaves for work, and adding fuel to a glowing fire, and just the look on Norman's face, knowing the reaction he's getting, seeing Norma and Romero kiss each other. It's a crazy scene to watch, crazy sight to see, and it really is crazy the way this was all done. But I have to say, again, Freddie Highmore really killed it here, and so did Vera Farmiga. They both really kill in this episode. As always, they always kill it, but this episode especially, I mean, amazing stuff there. What I love about Norman in this episode is that she's not denying what's going on with Norman. She just doesn't really want anyone to think that Norman's not okay, because she wants Norman all to herself. You know, she wants to make sure, she knows that Norman needs her. She knows that they need to stay together. She knows that Norman can't be without her, and she feels like she needs to be with Norman, you know, without Norman. Yes, things were good in her life, but I think she's just realizing that Norman needs her, and Norma just wants to move on. She says they can put up Christmas lights later, just be a family, and it's just not realistic. I mean, what Norma is saying, yes, I understand she's doing this to comfort Romero and trying to tell him, oh, everything's going to be okay, and because she wants both, as we know. I've said this before. Norma wants both Romero and Norman, when clearly she can just have one, and we know it can only be Norman. And that line last week when Norman said, for example, you know, you're in our lives, really, Romero is just in the middle of this kind of sick love story that really is going on. And I've heard many people say Bates Motel is a love story, and this episode really does show that. And it's not the love story of, like, you know, love story like a love story. Well, kind of it is to Norman, but really it's the story of, like, the mother and son, a very demented story of mother and son. So now it's time for more therapy. I like that we're seeing that Norman is still going to Edwards, even though he's no longer in the asylum. He's still going to Edwards, and he tells Edwards that he barely knows Romero, and I do understand what Norman is saying, that he barely knows Romero, and he does kind of, but he only knew Romero as the guy that was coming after him, as the guy that was the sheriff, and he doesn't know Alex Romero. This Romero he's never seen before. He's never seen Norma and Romero have this kind of compassion. And that's the thing that I really love, is that we, of course, have seen many scenes of, you know, Romero and Norma, but Norman's never really seen this. You know, he's never been present for those scenes, and because of that, that's why this is so weird to him. It's not just because Norma is making out with him, it's because it's a man that he barely knows, and that Norma only married him for the insurance, which, yes, we know that. And the doctor confronts him with the idea that it wouldn't be so bad if his mother was happy, which really, yeah, it would be a good thing for her to be happy, but as we know, Norma can't be happy, and it's really fantastic writing the way this was done. I mean, you can just tell that Norman is right when he notes that what happened while he was away traces back to Norman's fear of being alone, and that's something I love, is that Norman knows that he's in the wrong. Norman's even blaming himself for what he did, and it's a really interesting way that they tackled this. This is never coming across as Norman wanted to make Norma's life miserable. It's more that he feels that he needs to punish himself, but in order for him to do that, Norma has to be present, because he can't feel bad unless Norma feels bad right with him. He needs Norma by his side constantly, and it really is a crazy situation, but basically, he talks about like he was away, traced back to Norma's fear of being alone, and really that is her fear. I mean, in many ways, Norma didn't want to be alone. That's why she was with Romero, because she can't just be all by herself. She needs to have someone by her side, whether it's Romero or whether it's Norman, and she just can't have both. And, of course, she replaced Norman with Romero. In many ways, she did do that, and Norman may be crazy, but he also knows exactly what makes his mother tick. He says that she's as fragile as a baby bird, and he has no idea what he's got coming for him. And really, yeah, I mean, Romero just, again, he does not understand what really is going on between Norman and Norma. He just doesn't understand that relationship, and I don't think he ever really will. Again, he wasn't present for those scenes, so he doesn't really fully understand what's going on there. So Norma's pushing back against Romero's concerns, feeling protective of Norman, judged by her new husband, basically just saying, she makes excuses, claim that Romero wants Norman sent back to Pineview because he doesn't want to make room for him, and if she's forced to pick sides, as she feels she is, she will pick Norman every time. Now, at first, I found this annoying. I really did. I found this very annoying. I found it like, what the fuck, Norma? Why would you think this? But then I really thought, you know what, this is a very realistic interpretation of a mother's love for her child. Even though a mother, might have a husband in her life, she'll always put her child's needs before everyone else. That's what a great mother does. And Norma is a great mother. And that's something that she will do. She will always put Norman's needs before everyone else's. And yes, it's a problem. It's a problem she's had for years. And I think she's just kind of embracing at this point. Like, she knows, she recognizes that this is a problem. She recognizes that this is something that she does really badly with, is that knowing when to not involve herself with Norman, but she doesn't really know when to quit, I think she always thinks that she needs to be involved with Norman's life. I think she always feels that Norman needs her, which we know that he does, but basically, if she's forced to pick sides, she feels she will pick Norman every single time, and this perfectly does show that. Even though, of course, Romero she does love, Norman is the person that has been with her longer. I mean, remember how the show started out? It was always Norma and Norman. Romero kind of just got in there after Norman. Now, this relationship was developing, as we know. Last season, we did get some scenes between Norma and Romero, but again, those scenes took place when Norman wasn't present, and when Norman is present, now that he's in the house, things aren't as, can't really happen in the way that Norma wants them to. I think Norma genuinely wanted them to be a family. I think she genuinely wanted that family dynamic, but I think she knows that really that can't happen, and again, she's just really facing it. Romero really doesn't want to face that. He wants things to be a certain way, but again, he doesn't really fully understand that, so I thought that was very interesting. So then we get back to a very interesting scene. We see Dylan finds Audrey's earring among the clothes that Emma borrowed. So to briefly rehash, Norman did in fact kill Audrey. We find out in this episode he did kill Audrey, and that scene we saw of her, I'm guessing, was in Norman's mind. And Norman finds a dead woman's earring. It ends up in a coat that Emma takes back to her house, and basically, it's really great. At first it seemed like, oh, this is kind of convenient. This is just a way of, them acknowledging that Norman killed Audrey, but it really is great for what they eventually do with Dylan's character, which in my opinion is probably the greatest work we have done with Dylan this season. I mean, Dylan this season has been kind of on his own. He's been with Emma, he's been in a good place, he really has been more the lighter stuff this season. We've had this really nice dynamic with Emma, we've seen how he gets to get away from all that, and this really, I think, was him confirming that he's no longer really going to be a part of this drama anymore, and it's perfectly done in this scene, which we'll get into a little bit later, but I love the way this was done. Just this little reveal that Audrey, in fact, was the one that Norman killed. This tells Dylan two things. One, that Norman is a killer, and that Norman does kill. Two, that Norman is definitely not okay. Even though Norman thinks he's okay, he's definitely not okay. I think Norman knows that he's not okay, but she wants to pretend he's okay. So Rebecca's caught trying to flee to the Indianapolis of all places. She's trying to flee to Indianapolis, and she agrees to work with the DEA to get a bigger fish. She'll wear a wire and try to get Romero to confess to killing Bob Paris. And basically, that's what's going on here. Now, I like that we found out what was going on here exactly. She basically is going to try to be a, sort of like a mole for the DEA to try to get information. And basically, it's amazing that she thinks Romero would fall for such a thin ruse, but Rebecca has always been, as we know, a bit naive. Like, she always thinks that, Romero's just going to blatantly point out things, which we know straight out that he's not going to. He's going to make sure that no one finds out that he killed Bob Paris. Even though we know that he did kill Bob Paris, he doesn't want anyone to find out, obviously. And he's going to make sure that no one finds out about that. Which I really did like seeing. I thought there was some really great stuff there with Rebecca and Romero in this episode. And you can see that while she wants Romero to reveal it, I don't think he's ever going to reveal it to her. I think eventually they do have a conversation in this episode, which we'll get into. But I do like that we found out more what was going on with Rebecca, because I really wasn't certain where they were really taking her after last week's episode. I mean, we knew we saw her again. I didn't really know what was going on there. But it does show that Bob Paris plot is continuing, which we knew was going to happen. We knew eventually that had to come up. We knew eventually Romero would have confessed that. I mean, he can't just get away from that. I feel like that's one of Romero's reasons for marrying Norma, is because he could get away from the whole Bob Paris of it all and have to cover that up, which of course Norma never found out. And we'll get into that later, but definitely very interesting. And at the same time, Romero and Dylan are meeting in secret. Romero knows that Dylan has seen Norman's violent behavior, and it's a really great scene here, what Romero decided to do, because he knows that Dylan's the one that's seen Norman, this erratic, and he must have, and Dylan doesn't think that he should be home either. And Romero proposed that they need two family members to have him come in, and they can do so behind Norma's back. And the best thing to do is to get him and Romero, will they do it? What if it saves Norma's life? Really, there are a lot of pros and cons to this. Obviously Norma might hate Romero for it, but it might be the best thing for her to get Norman away from her, because that's the best thing to do. But again, we can't do that. We can't ever have Norman away from Norma. Norman can never be away from Norma. And Dylan says he'll try to talk to her, and it's a really great scene because you see that Dylan genuinely thinks that he'll be able to get through to Norma and that he'll actually be able to help her with this, which excuse me, I thought was actually a very good direction. Sorry. I don't know why I'm sneezing so much. I thought that was a very good direction to take this in. I really did like seeing that. I thought there was some really good stuff there, and I thought they did a very good job with what they did between Norma and with Romero here, because like I said, Dylan really thinks he'll be able to get through to Norma, which we know he's not really going to, but he really is thinking that. And then we get this incredible scene that I think really sums up how Dylan's been this entire show. I mean, we've seen as the scenes have gone on, Dylan and Norma's relationship has become better, but we remember how the show started out. These two were as distant as you can imagine. I mean, they were like oil and water. They could not be more different. Dylan called her Norma, if you remember, but we can see that this scene's not about committing Norman. It's about the earring. That's really what this is all about, because he wants to know how Norma couldn't have noticed this. They get into a fight. Why was she keeping it? Why was she claiming it as her own? Because Norma knew that Norman killed Audrey. She knew that straight out, and Dylan's afraid of what's going to happen. She's still in denial, and then Dylan reveals that he met with Romero, and the worst thing that they can do to Norma is go behind her back, and it gets really ugly, and, obviously she's really pissed that he'd do this and go behind her back like this, and everything that's going on there, and Dylan says straight out that, I love what he says, that she's never been a real mother to him, and yeah, he's not wrong. He's really not wrong. I mean, Norma has always put Norman over Dylan. It never has been Dylan over Norman. She's never really treated Dylan like a son. She's tried to, but it's always been Norman over Dylan. And again, Dylan is just someone that is standing in Norman and Norma's relationship, which is again really sad, because you can see that Dylan really does care about Norman and really just want to help him. There was a point when Norman did care about Dylan, but now things have changed. Norman is no longer as stable as he used to be. Norman is no longer normal, and he's now a psycho, and now he wants to be with Norma. And instead of trying to talk him into staying, she asks for the earring. Protecting Norman is more important than losing Dylan. And we see basically Dylan kind of leaves her life. He's gone. I don't think he's ever going to be, honestly, I think Dylan's done. I don't think Dylan's going to be seen again. This might be the last scene we ever saw with Dylan, because the way that the promo is for next week, it really seems like we're heading to this new direction for Bates Motel, which I'll get into. But the scene here, we see Norman comes home just in time to get a hug from his brother, and he just says goodbye, Norman, and it seemed like a goodbye to the show. I mean, honestly, this might be Max Theriot's last scene. If it was really satisfying. It almost played like a series finale. It really did. A lot of this actually played like a series finale because of the way this episode really was, and I really like that. I like seeing it play like a series finale. It should play like a series finale because of the events of what happens at the end of this episode. So while Norma's codependency grows stronger, Rebecca goes to meet Romero, who's surprised to see her, obviously because he thought that she left, and she acts like nothing is wrong, fishes very poorly for information. He's not biting at all, basically saying nothing, because he knows that she's there to obviously get information, and he says he speaks directly into it. It sure looks like Rebecca is out of options, and unfortunately, it doesn't really seem like that's going to work out for her at all. So Rebecca, she's not going to get that information. Again, I know Rebecca's not the smartest, but come on, I mean, you really thought you were going to get the information out of him? You really thought that he was going to rat out to you everything? I mean, Romero is not stupid. He knows when you're going after him, and he's not going to give you that information, unfortunately. So Romero goes to his office, and Norma is obviously furious. It's over. She'll never trust him again. She basically just breaks up with him right there, and things are done. It seems like they can never be together again. And it's really sad, because I do think that Norma genuinely cared about Romero. I do think she genuinely loved him. But no one comes between her and Norman. We've known this, and when you cross Norman, you cross Norma. And that really is what it is. If you go behind Norman's back, you're going behind Norma's back. Even though Norma was Romero and seemed to love him, again, Norman was not present in her life. And now that Norman's back, it's created this new dynamic between her and Norman. You know, she needs to be with Norman constantly. She tried to get away from Norman, and she can't do that. And I think she's just realizing that she needs Norman in her life. She needs to be this, she needs to be the one that advocates Norman all these things. And obviously Romero's furious because he really just wanted to get through to her. He really what he just wants to do is protect her. And you can see that while he's upset, he genuinely still loves her. And I love seeing that because Romero really did nothing wrong. He's really just someone that really just wanted Norma to just get some help. You know, he really just wanted Norman to get some help. He didn't necessarily mean killing Norman, but he did really just want to help him because he really could see that Norman was struggling, and he thought the best thing to do was to get Norman help because Norman really is not, in a really good state. And if only he'd begged her to stay or followed her home. And then we get to what I know you guys want me to talk about, which this was just crazy. I mean, after this, I thought last week was hard to watch. Last week was really hard to watch for Romero, but that is nothing compared to what happens in these next few scenes. Norman's in his basement. He's going through some things when he finds Audrey's suitcase. He discovers bloody clothes and hair, and the robe that he was wearing is Norma when he killed her. And it's a fantastic scene because he's now remembering what he did. It's amazing because we know when he's Norma, he doesn't remember what he did. You know, when he goes into that Norma personality and puts on that robe and starts acting like Norma, he does not remember. And to me, this seemed like he is now remembering that he did in fact kill Audrey. Because remember, he wanted to deny it. He wanted to say, oh, no, it was definitely not me. Because he genuinely thought that it was Norma. He thought that Norma did in fact kill Audrey. But now he's realizing that it was him. It was all him. He killed Audrey. He pretended to be, he was in a split personality. He was Norma. And, now he knows that he's a killer, and it really, I think, he's not necessarily, he is upset, obviously, he's very emotional, but I think it also makes Norman a lot more aware. Now that he knows this, I feel like Norman's going to use this to his advantage, and it really, again, feels like a series finale. He buries the evidence just before his mother comes home, and we are now done with the whole innocent side of Norman. He now is no longer going to deny that that part of him exists. He knows that part of him exists. He knew for a while, but he didn't know that that part of him was a killer. He never thought that he actually killed Audrey. He never actually thought that, and now that he knows that, he doesn't really know what to do, but you can see that he really, I think, is going to use this to his advantage. Knowing Norman, that's exactly what he's going to do, and we see Norma looks completely defeated, and she now knows that she's no longer winning this fight. Now it is completely Norman who is controlling everything, and she says straight out it's not going to work between her and Romero, and she really is devastated because she really wanted to be with Romero. Again, she wanted this life where she could be with Romero and with Norman, but it just wasn't going to happen. It wasn't realistic. It wasn't something that I think was possible, and I think Norma deep down knew that, but she just couldn't really accept it, and now she does have to accept that. And we see she says, asking if they can have leftovers for dinner as she's on the verge of tears, and even the word leftovers feels like a loss, like they've returned to their own ways. You can see, they're now back to just the two of them, and it's something that we never wanted to see, but we knew was eventually going to happen. Bates Motel, how to start Norma and Norman, and it makes sense that we end this episode with Norma and Norman. She knows in her heart that, I think she knows straight out that Romero did care for her, and that Romero was there for her, but she really just needed to put Norman's needs before his, and Norman hugs her, says that he's so sorry, and part of him knows that this is his fault, and it's a fantastic scene. That scene where she opens the fridge, and she's kind of just taking a look at what's in it, and just realizing that this is all she has left. This is all it is. It's just her and Norman now. She's obviously crying because she just realized in this moment, I'm thinking, that she just made a terrible mistake, but she can't go back because that damage with Romero already happened. She already ended that. She can't go back. She wants to go back, but she can't go back, and it's really sad to see. Definitely really hard to watch, and definitely one of the hardest scenes I think we've ever had in Bates Motel history. So she then writes a letter to Romero saying that she'll always love no matter what. She's truly sorry, and as she cries, she puts her wanger in the envelope and seals it, knowing that she can never get the part of her life back. And I feel that's her just realizing that all that greatness and all that great stuff that she had in her life, she can't have a life, really. She no longer has a life. Norman is now her life, and that's it. And she needs to focus completely on Norman. She really does not have control over that anymore. And Norman comes in to say goodnight, suggesting it's time for them to, they move from White White Pine Bay, which is a very interesting situation that he actually talks to her about doing this, which makes sense. He suggests Oahu would save her because it's an island, walk away from the house, let the bank have it, it's time to go. And that is true. I mean, if we remember, the reason they came to White Pine Bay was to start over. We remember that, of course, Norman had killed his father, and, well, we didn't know that yet, but Norman had killed his father, and they had come back to White Pine, they had come to White Pine Bay basically to start over, and it hasn't worked at all. Now, Norman's thinking, maybe we should relocate. Maybe we should just start over and let the bank have it. It's time to go. They're almost happy in this moment, saying things like they're very charming people. Although you can tell Norma's saying that they're supposed to be together, aren't they? He responds, yes, we are forever. Now, when he says this, I mean, it's very creepy. It's not sincere at all. I think he genuinely does love his mother, but it's very creepy. And especially with him singing that song Pearly Shells, which is a Hawaiian song that was covered by everyone. He kisses the back of Norma's head, turns off the lights, and then he doesn't close his eyes, and then we realize really what Norman has done, and it is devastating what Norman has decided to do. We pan the house, and I love that this was just a panning shot. Just the way that this was just a tracking shot here was really well done. It almost felt like we were just in the middle of this, rather than we really couldn't get to stop this. We didn't get to see this play out, so we couldn't stop Norman in any way, and it really was a great scene the way this was done. We pan the house, silent and eerie. Norman's still awake, staring at his mother as she sleeps. He creeps out, goes down the basement, turns on the broken furnace. He stares at the flame. We pan up the crack of the furnace as Mr. Sandman plays. We watch the house vents are closed from the inside. Norman locks the front door. He gets back in bed as the only open vent blows carbon monoxide. And if you guys know, that kills you. And we realize in the scene that, remember in episode 2 when Norman said, I'm going to kill you, and he's going to kill the both of us? Now he's actually doing that. He basically is not going to let Norman go unless he kills himself, because I think Norman feels, one, that he deserves it because of all he's done, but two, he's not going to go out without his mother. He's going to make sure that his mother goes with him. He's going to make sure that his mother's by his side. That's the way that he wants to die, and it's really sad, honestly. It obviously is very sad, but we pan back to the blue flames of the furnace and out to the blue neon hue of the Bates Motel sign, and we see then the devastating scene where Romero pulls up. He takes the stairs to the front door. He knocks. No lights are on. It's locked. He has a key. He knows something is wrong because everything's, the doors are locked. Nothing's happening. And he calls Norma, gets no answer. He climbs up the stairs, and this is as terrifying as the shower scene. It really is. I mean, this scene was like the shower scene. Alex sees them, Romero sees them in bed. He calls Norma's name, and he can't wake her up. And there's that devastating scene where he realizes he can't wake her up. Now, why did Romero go? I think he went because he wanted to right the wrongs. He wanted to tell Norma that he's sorry, that he knows that, I think he just wanted to apologize. He didn't want to end things the way he did, and he can't wake her up. He smells a gas, breaks the window, carries her out of her room, opening the window in the hall, tries to perform CPR, but Norma's not responsive. The music swells. Norman is coughing, and wakes up. Norman actually wakes up, and we see Romero weeping, saying, "Come on, baby." And obviously Norman had to wake up because the show would be over. Norman turns, see what remains of his family, a stepfather in agony, and a dead mother, and Norma's dead. Norma is dead in episode 9 of season 4, and as the episode ends, he says the word often most associated with Norman Bates. He says the word mother, and that is how the episode ends, and oh my god, guys, I mean, where we go from here is crazy. It really is, because we know where we go from here. It seems like where we go from here is a much more psycho type approach, that Norman's now all on his own. He's now facing Romero. He's going to probably kill Romero in the next episode, and then I hear that season 5 is going to be really different, and I kind of predicted this. I kind of predicted that Norman would kill Norma in season 4 and then have to deal with that in season 5. And it kind of does make sense for Norman to go in that place where he has to turn into the psycho and actually have to deal with what he does there. Because we know what he does with Norma's corpse. We know that he ends up locking her in that cellar. And now it kind of makes sense why. Because Norman knows he did wrong. I feel like to punish himself, he's going to keep that corpse with him, basically to punish himself, and also because he needs that looming spirit of his mother near him at all times, which is terrifying to think about, but I think that's exactly why he does end up keeping that corpse with him, because we know exactly he's going to keep that corpse with him. We know he's not going to, let Romero take her. We know he's going to keep that corpse with him. But what a crazy episode, guys. I mean, really, this was an amazing episode, a very well acted, probably, honestly, maybe the best episode of Bates Motel ever, really. This episode was incredible. It really was. Freddie Highmore was incredible. Vera Farmiga was amazing here. But I just can't believe they actually killed off Norma. I can't get over that. I can't believe that the show actually went there. But they actually did it. They actually killed off Norma. She's gone. She's not coming back. And it's really crazy to think about. but it does make sense, obviously. I mean, the direction we were headed, like I said, Norma's life was no longer in her own control. She now was controlled by Norman, and Norman controlled everything that she did, and because of that, Norman decided that they need to die, and that's exactly what happened here. Norman now has killed the both of them, and now how Norman deals with it, I don't really know. I don't know what Norman does from here. I have no idea where the show goes, but it seems like Dylan's gone. It seems like Emma's gone. Now it's just Norman, and I like that. I like that. The poster for this season is Norman by himself, and now it makes sense. Norman is our main character. Norman is our main focus. Norman's the reason why we all watch this show, is because we want to see him turn into that psycho, and we totally saw that here. We totally saw him turn into that psycho, and just those little subtle things, like him just looking at Norma, and him just realizing that he's a killer. I think he's really going to use this as an advantage. Knowing he has that Norm personality in him, I think he's really going to use that. Now that Norman's not actually alive, he's probably going to go a bit crazy, and I think we're really going to start to see how he turns into the Norman Bates that we see in Psycho, which is very close to what he is right now. I mean, he really is a psycho at this point. He killed his mother. I mean, it doesn't really get crazier than that. But we know eventually things do get crazier, but Romero's doomed. I mean, I don't see Romero getting out of this at all. Some people say Romero might just run away, but I honestly don't know, guys. I don't know what happens from here. I have no idea at this point. There are literally so many directions they could take this in. I don't even want to think about the possibilities. There are literally so many possibilities. I don't know what happens from here. I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. Let me know if you guys saw this episode. This episode was just crazy. It really was an insane episode. There was some amazing stuff. Obviously, I can't believe they actually killed off Norma, but this is just the beginning of what next week's season finale is going to be. I have no idea where we're headed for next week's finale, and I'm very excited for that. I think, like they said, next week's finale really is going to be a preview of what the last season is going to be, which I think is going to be probably the most psychological, brutal stuff we've seen from this show, definitely. But I really do give it up to the show for actually sticking with killing off Norma, because that was a key event that needed to happen. They actually stuck with it. I'm very happy that they did. Overall, guys, you guys saw this episode. Do you really think that Norma's death was satisfying? Left your thoughts in it. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for The Path. Yes, I know I am behind with The Path, but I am going to catch up, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.